Have you ever performed a wedding gig and then at the end of the night somehow they just don't have your payment? Or maybe you did a theater contract and oof, the stories I could tell, where the check was supposed to go in the mail and somehow it never arrived. Well, this video is for you if you are a gigging performing artist and you want to make sure that you always get paid, no matter whether the bride runs away from the groom or the groom doesn't show up for the wedding is canceled because of a storm. We want to make sure that you get paid. Now I want to start by sharing a little story that I experienced where I was hired to sing a concert. In this particular concert, it involved a band and rehearsals, and I showed up and we did the rehearsals, and then on another day we did more rehearsals, and then on another day we did the concert, and it went great and everybody loved it. It was amazing. And they didn't have the check. And I was like, I'm supposed to get paid, and there was no check. And so I knew who it was that was supposed to pay me, and I just kept calling and calling until one day he said, yes, I have the check. You can come and get it. So I came to get it. Now, first of all, we don't want you to have to be tracking down the person that's supposed to pay you, and we don't want you to get paid late. But I was thrilled. I was so thrilled. I went and I picked up the check. I took it to the bank and I deposited it. And then, can you guess what happened? Bounced. Okay, so now I know this is really problematic. Like, am I gonna actually get paid for this gig? And I tracked him down again. I called, I kept calling. I said, there was insufficient funds. What do you wanna do about this? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, okay, after a bunch of calls, come in, I've got another check for you. And also, he wanted me to perform for him again. But I still hadn't gotten paid for the first one. I was like, okay, I'm gonna perform for you again, provided that I get paid in advance and I get the check for the last gig up front. Was this smart of me? Maybe not. But this was during the phase of life when I'm like, I wanna get any gig I can and like cross my fingers and hope I get paid. So I do the concert and I get the double check now. It's one check, but with more money. And I take that to the bank. So this time I was a little bit savvy about it and I'd done a little bit of research. And what I discovered is that if you take a check to the actual bank that it's issued by, in this case it was a Bank of America, you can find out whether the person has sufficient funds to cash it. And if they don't, then you can wait. So that's what I did. I took it in and I was like, the last time I got a check from this particular person, it bounced. Can you tell me if there's sufficient funds to cash it? And they said yes. And now this was a few years ago. I assume that you can still do this. I don't know, you'll have to do your own due diligence, but this was my experience. They said yes, they checked and they said there's not sufficient funds. And I said, what do you suggest I do? And they said, well, it looks like there's something clearing and it should clear their account, like there was a deposit that's clearing. It should clear their account on, it was like 3 days later. So come back in 3 days and then check again. See, the problem is if you deposit the check right away, then you don't know if it bounces and the check is gone. But this way I didn't deposit it. I was waiting until there was actually sufficient funds in the account. And I did it and it actually cleared, but I did not perform for him again. It was just way too stressful. So what is the thing that's gonna help you to avoid this kind of situation is a contract, a legally binding contract. And that's what this video is gonna be about. 3 things that we wanna make absolutely sure you include in your contracts and 1 bonus tip. Hi, I'm Fiona Flyte, and it is my passion and my privilege to help performing artists just like you with money and personal power. Now, we need them both, right? We need the personal power to enforce our contracts, and we need money to live and live well, because all the time you spend into cultivating your talent, I believe you deserve to be paid. So if this kind of content matters to you, if you find it useful, then definitely subscribe to the channel, follow me on the socials, and come on over and join my free Facebook group. I made it especially for performing artists. Also, if you have friends and colleagues who are artists, then go ahead and share this video with them, because the more of us out there talking about money and talking about enforcing our contracts and marketing and branding and becoming independent, not just as a catchphrase, I'm an indie artist, but actually truly being independent, but with financial and time freedom, the more of us out there changing the whole paradigm, the better. Would you agree? Okay, so in my last video, we talked quite a lot about the personal power required to enforce your contracts. We talked about how you need to be willing to walk away if the contract isn't right for you, and how you have to deal with the disappointment of them not appreciating how much you bring to the table, and how it can be hard to have this sense of maybe somebody's not going to like you if you try to enforce your contract or your boundaries. So if you haven't watched that video yet, you can do that after this one. Because in this one, we're going to assume that you already have the personal power to stand for your contracts. And now we're talking about what exactly needs to go in them, and we're going to cover 3 things that very specifically are non-negotiable for your contracts if you want to make sure that you get paid no matter what. And definitely stay to the end because there is a bonus tip. Okay, so the first one is a no-brainer, right? It is the payment policy. How and when do you expect to get paid? How do you take payments? Do you take check and cash, or do you take credit cards? Do you take Venmo? Do you take PayPal? Are you expecting to be paid before the event, after the event, during the event, some now, some later? One of the things that I highly advise is that you always require a deposit, especially for anything that is taking you any distance or requires preparation or requires you to hold a date on the calendar well in advance. So if somebody wants to hire you for their wedding gig that is not until December and currently it's July, then they definitely need to pay money that's non-refundable to hold that date. Which brings us to our next line item, which is the cancellation policy. Because you're like, what? If they book in July and then they cancel before December, I get to keep the deposit? And I'm saying it depends on what you negotiate in your contract. If you're somebody who books well in advance, and you probably already know this, but if you are somebody that's up and coming and beginning to build your living in music or whatever kind of performing and art you do, then this is something you want to be planning for and knowing now. If somebody wants to book you out, it means that you can't schedule something else on that date. And so at what point does the cancellation policy kick in, and what exactly does it say? So for example, if they cancel 1 week before the wedding and they've already paid in full, because that's your requirement, is like 2 weeks before the wedding it's completely paid, 1 week before the wedding it's no longer refundable, nothing is refundable, that could be a choice. But also, let's go with the example of the wedding booked for December and it's July. Let's say your string quartet, the whole fee is going to be $1,000. And you've said there's a $250 non-refundable deposit required to hold that date. And then you say half payment is due in September, for example, and you say full payment is due at the end of the gig, let's say. I mean, it's all up to you. And it's now August, and they have decided they no longer want your string quartet, and you say, okay, no problem. That deposit per the contract is non-refundable. We each go our separate ways, but you still keep the $250. So it's entirely up to you exactly what you want to be refundable and non-refundable. But for sure, if they're gonna book you for a specific date, I recommend taking a deposit and making that deposit non-refundable. That doesn't mean that the entire payment is due, although it can, it's up to you. And this gets back to that whole personal power issue, doesn't it? It's us being firm and our knowing that even if we don't perform the gig in December, we are deserving of pay for holding that date for them. Now, let's go with another example. In this case, the groom does not show up for the wedding. And you're like, but I didn't sing my songs, or I didn't perform in the party because there was no party. Well, here's what I want to say to you. Did you practice? Did you prepare? Did you drive there if you drove there? Or maybe it was canceled the day before, but did you prepare your songs? You still deserve to get paid. And I want you to think for a second about other industries where the result is not necessarily guaranteed. Let's take a trial lawyer, for example. You think that trial lawyer is not going to bill for all of their billable hours just because they lost the case? Like, you hired the lawyer and they put hours and hours of effort into preparing for your trial, and then you lost. But guess what? You still owe them for all their time, even though the result was bad. And how about a surgeon? You think the surgeon is not going to get paid just because the patient died on the operating table? Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe it was a risky procedure, or even things happen. But that surgeon is still getting paid no matter the outcome. So I'm saying if you prepared to do the work, like the trial lawyer prepared to go to trial, then you deserve to get paid, don't you? But sometimes as artists, we just don't make these connections, and we have been so enculturated to believe that we're so lucky we get to do what we love that we don't really sit in how much time, effort, expertise, talent goes into what it is that you do as an artist. And whether other people outside of us understand it or not, you understand it. And the more you stand in the certainty within yourself that yes, indeed, you deserve to be well compensated like any other person in any other industry, the more likely it is that you will be paid. Okay, and now let's talk about length, because length really matters too. This needs to be so clear and written into your contract. There needs to be no miscommunication about whether or not you're gonna stay overtime, whether you're gonna play another 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. That all gets to be contracted. You can say, yeah, of course I'll play for another hour. Just per the contract, that means you owe another $200. No problem. Is there a fee for setup? Is there a fee for takedown? Is there a fee for the additional time spent learning new repertoire? These are all things that get to be included in your contract and also in your negotiations. Okay, and I did promise you that bonus tip, right? And this one is really important and learned through bad experiences in the past. This is to make sure that you have clauses in your contract to cover any random things that are really necessary. For example, let's say you do a lot of outdoor events and you have gotten absolutely baked and sunburned in the past. And so now you know that you need a clause that talks about shade. There has to be some kind of shade for wherever it is that you're performing. Or maybe you want to make sure there's water, make sure there's on-site bathrooms. What kind of equipment are you required to bring? This is always an issue for pianists. Are you bringing your own keyboard, or is there a piano there? If there's a piano there, of what quality is that piano? You'd be surprised. Sometimes having high quality grand piano is completely reasonable in the contract, even to the point of specifying which model and make you want. Now, yes, that is the higher paid contracts, but something to think about. What about the sound system? Do you require a sound system? Do you bring your own? If you're bringing your own, like again, if it's outdoor, is there somewhere to plug in? So being really sure that you have gone through in your head, like what are all the things that you assume will be there, but maybe they won't be. Okay, so just remember that you need both the contract and the personal power and the boundary setting and all of the good inner work so that you show up so confidently in negotiations when you talk about contracts. I understand that we want to be very generous when we're working with venues and we're working with wedding coordinators and brides and churches, and we're wanting to create relationships that last a long time. And it's very easy to think, well, I just expect that they'll pay me because they should, and that's just part of the relationship, right? I don't need to be all enforcing of contracts or even having a contract. And here's where I say actually having a contract creates a structure around the relationship, the business part. So you can have a really wonderful collegial, friendly kind of relationship, but on top of that, there's this other place that's the structure in which the business resides, and that is your contract. Now, if you are a performing artist who wants to really get strategic about the business side of your career, if you're a music teacher who also does gigs, if you're a gigging artist, if you want to learn about social media and marketing and growing your business and creating all kinds of interesting offers at different price points, creating passive income, then number one, come join my free Facebook group because I do deepening trainings in there all the time and there's daily content. And number two, consider reaching out about whatever my current paid programs are. I've got paid programs on creating short form video, on marketing, on social media, on stepping more into your personal power, on mindset, on energetics. I'm all about the strategy, but I'm also about the magic. I'm all about the manifestation, but I'm also about the contracts. I'm all about the manifestation, but I'm also about the long-term recurring income. So if you're at a place in your career where you're thinking, I'm ready to go all in and take this seriously, then definitely reach out. And at a minimum, subscribe to the channel, follow me on the socials, and again, share this video with your friends and colleagues, because together we can change the expectation for the new generation of artists. And by expectation, what I mean is the expectation that yes, you can make a good living in the arts. Yes, doing what you love, and also, yes, getting well paid for your time, talent, and expertise. And now, as always, go out into the world and shine your light. You have a voice, you deserve to be heard, and the world deserves to hear you.